Hey, I'm Dorcas, speaker, author, and transformational healing coach. For the past 5 years, I have been joyously healing from a life of abandonment trauma, rape, suicidal ideations, molestation, and so much more. Now I get to live in my purpose while empowering you to embrace the joy of your own healing journey. I unapologetically spoke my truth and I did the work. Now it's time to go deeper as I empower you and let you know that healing is so worth it as we go beyond. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of Beyond the Healing.
Yes.
All season, have been here just having some real relatable conversations, giving you hope and some tools that we hope helped you go deeper in your healing journey and beyond the healing. And so I am so thankful that um, I get to sit down with my dear sister, Brittany Monay, and just allow her to pour into each of you today. Whether you no matter where you are in your healing journey, whether you're in it in the thick of it, you're deciding whether to start it or you are beyond your healing journey. I just wanted to just take some time and to allow her to share her heart. This has been an amazing season so far. I'm excited for next season, but I just want to take some time to just enjoy the moment, enjoy every guest that has graced this podcast this season. Thank you so much. But Brittany, I've had the opportunity to get to know her for a couple of years. We met on those great clubhouse streets when it was just a circle with a picture and we just heard the voice. And God has allowed me to just see her heart, see her spirit. She graced the cover of Women of Hope magazine last year, and her story is amazing. Her journey is amazing, and I really wanted her to come on and share that journey with all of my listeners so that you can just be empowered and inspired to just keep going. Her story is very multifaceted.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I'm gonna stop talking. Allow her to, yeah, and I'm gonna allow her to introduce herself to you all, and then we'll just jump right into the conversation. Brittany, thank you so much for your yes and coming on and just sharing your heart, not only with me but with the listeners. So just take a moment and just let them know who you are.
Well, first, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. And I can just count on Dorcas to stretch me every time. But hello, everyone. I'm Brittany Monay Pugh. I'm a wife. I am a certified life coach. I'm a bonus mom, a dog mom. I'm a poet. I'm an author. I'm a podcaster. All of the things. But most of all, I'm a daughter, right? A beloved daughter of Christ. And I would just say that the journey has just taught me how to just walk in the disciplines of God. Like,
Mm.
that's all I'm out here doing. Just being obedient and really moving past the discomfort.
Oh,
So that, in doing that, I create, biblical strategies and insights and helping women and empowering them to live, not to live as the world lives, but to live as, Christ tells us to live. And that is not easy to do in today's world, but it's something that I believe that God has blessed me to be able to do. And it's an honor and a privilege. And every day I'm just out here dying to myself. But I'm happy to be here.
dying to yourself is something in itself,
Yes.
because in order for anyone to navigate any type of healing journey, spiritual healing, mental, emotional healing, you have to die to self. And that's one thing God tells us: we have to die to ourselves daily. We have to
Yes.
submit to Him. And I know for sure, even embarking on my healing journey, that if I hadn't died to self, I hadn't submitted to the will of God, submitted to His direction, and been obedient, I wouldn't have done it, because it is uncomfortable. It,
Yes.
it takes you to a place where you really have to see you. for, see you in your mess in order
Yes.
to see you out of your mess.
Yes.
That part.
Yes. That part right
God has to show you in your mess
there. Mm-hmm.
before he can show you out of your mess.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy. It's not, I'm gonna say not always. It's not easy seeing yourself in your mess, because we do what we can to cover it up. We do what we can
Yeah.
to ignore it. We do what we can to suppress it
Yes.
um to the best of our abilities. So when we die to self and we're obedient to God and he tells us to expose it all so that we can see ourselves in the thick of it. Yeah,
Ooh,
that
child.
takes that takes another level of courage and
Yes.
strength and obedience
Yes.
that so many people run away from, and I get
Yeah.
it. I totally get it. So let's just take a journey so that the listeners will know about your journey. We're going to get into where you are now, and
Mm.
we've heard a little bit about what you do and who you are, but let's just take them on a journey of Brittany Monay, as a child, as a teen, as an adult, and then we'll go into where you are now beyond your healing. So,
Okay. For as long as I can remember, um, I believe the enemy was after my life. So my dad was killed a month and 10 days after I was born. So that label of a daddyless daughter, that stuck with me for years. I remember as far back as being in like kindergarten when there was the daddy daughter event the teacher threw. And at that moment, I realized I lacked something.
mhm.
Um, that was the moment where I felt the absence of my dad, if that made sense.
Yeah.
Being not only the only colored girl in the class, um, but being the girl that didn't have a dad there, like that crushed me. And I remember my mom uh, having a conversation with me after, because I was heartbroken. I cried and everything. And even in my mom sharing with me at that young age about my dad, I saw her grieve.
Mm.
Um, and my mother was a strong woman, but I saw her grieve. And those emotions, that moment kind of played a part. It played a big part in how I saw myself, um, and taking on that identity that I didn't even realize had traveled with me from the age of 5 all the way up into my adult years. And then, things happened to me growing up that my mother didn't know about. And I lost my mother at 11. She died of asthma. And I never told my mother, I was touched. I never told my mother the things that had happened. And I think the enemy played with that as well,
Mhm.
for years, right? She died not knowing. But one of the things that also sticks out to me before she left, I remember it like it was yesterday, but the ambulance had come into the house to get her. I was very used to calling the ambulance when my mother had an asthma attack. I knew how to put the stuff in the machine and all of the things, right? Young age, because she had very bad asthma. But I remember the ambulance carrying her down the steps, taking her out the door, and she's like, she just screamed out, "Brittany, I love you." And I didn't know, like, I just was always used to her coming back. Like, she'd come back like regular, but she didn't come back that night.
Mm.
And I had awakened to hearing, I thought it was laughter, but a couple hours later, I learned that it was crying. And I had went downstairs to get some juice, and I had asked her boyfriend at the time, like, "What's wrong?" He's like, "Oh, nothing, just laughing about something," right? Like brushing it off. And then um, I had awoken to car doors closing, and it was my family. Went downstairs, people on the couch, and they're like, "Brittany, your mother died," and it just crushed me. That feeling, that same feeling from the age of 5. Oh gosh. Um, so that experience followed me for years. And it's so funny because even talking about it, like, I know God has healed me and all the things, but the pain is still there. Um, just the sound and the experience and the emotions, like, I feel as if it was just yesterday.
Yeah.
um, but me and my brother were uprooted from my baby sister. She was 2 months at the time. My brother was two. I was 11. Me and my brother had to go stay with a relative that we would, see when my mother would drive to New York in the summers. But we ended up, living with my aunt and her three kids and her husband. And it was a different life for me. It was a different speed.
Yeah.
Um, it just, everything was different. And where we came from a loving mother, not saying my aunt wasn't loving, but she had three kids of her own. So I knew what it was like to be a burden. I felt that. Um,
Wow.
I felt the absence of my mother, a mother's love. I felt that absence. No one can replace a mother's love. No one. And those feelings, were hard. It was hard adjusting and going through, preteen into teen years. Um, just not having the person um, that brought you into this world. So my my aunt was a little strict. She would whoop her kids. Now I wasn't unfamiliar with butt whoopings. My mother definitely took that belt to my behind, but
Yeah.
it was different when me and my brother would experience, my aunt's form of discipline, and I had grew tired of it after a while, and I remember um, we had gotten to like a physical altercation. It was a little physical, and she had slapped me, and I called my grandmother, and my grandmother drove from Brooklyn to Long Island. She came and got me. Um, my brother couldn't go with me because that wasn't his grandmother. This was my father's mother. So
Mm.
um, my grandmother took me to the precinct. She made a police report, um, and she took me back to Brooklyn. The next day, I had um, went downstairs to my aunt's house because my grandmother and my aunts all lived in the same complex. So I went downstairs and saw my bags. My aunt had threw my stuff in garbage bags and left it at my aunt's door. So not so long after, I found that the police had went to my aunt's job, and a whole big thing. So even in doing that, that kind of separated me from my mother's side of the family. Um,
Mm.
so now I'm 15 and I don't associate with my mother's side. It
Because
was,
you're
yeah,
because you're the one. How dare you?
yeah. hmm And it's so crazy because, I wasn't perfect. I was the troubled teen, but I think my acting out was,
They cry for help.
yeah, yeah. And it wasn't perceived that way. Like me and my brother had a social worker when we went through the whole, guardianship process when we came to New York. She would come to the house, ask, surface level questions, and it still wasn't enough. Like she didn't see, and yeah, so it was a lot. Even before I left, I had began cutting myself to cope with the pain. No one knew. Only my best friend, when I went to school and I had my sleeve rolled up for something and she looked and saw my arm. So I would take a razor and cut my arms, like my arm to
Mm-hmm.
numb the pain. So that followed me though when I went to Brooklyn. And I remember uh, feeling the absence of my brother because now we're separated. Me and my brother were, like this. And So shortly after, now I'm in Brooklyn, he's in Long Island. I don't speak to my mother's side of the family. Um, and that was just another level of grief. And on top of the grief that I was already feeling. So um, from there, my aunt had walked in on me cutting myself one day with a knife, and that shed light to my father's side that Brittany wasn't okay. But again, yeah, it didn't change for me. Um, it was still that cry for help, and
They didn't
I
know how to help you.
yeah, no one knew because I can honestly say between my mother and father's side of the family, everyone had their parents,
But you,
but me, but me.
you know, I sit here and I listen, and
Mhm.
God is so intentional how He connects the paths of people. Both of my parents are still alive, but I didn't grow up in the house with either of my parents. And so, in so many ways, I can relate to your story.
Yeah.
I grew up with my mom's side of the family. I'm closer to my dad's side of the family,
Mhm.
even though I grew up with my mom's side of the family. That has caused some tension, but just listening to your story and just, yeah. And you were just in a cycle of grief,
Yeah.
at the age of 5, even though your dad died when you were an infant,
Mhm.
that grief really set in when when you were put in a situation to realize that I really don't have my dad.
Mhm.
And that was that father daughter event.
Yes.
You never knew him because, I mean, you were infant.
Mhm.
I mean, what, a month old, not even 2 months
Yeah.
old. And so you never
Mhm.
got to it. There was no, like, you never got to experience, you were never put in a situation where you literally had to grieve him
Yeah.
until you were faced with a father daughter event, and you had to really accept the fact that the reality is, I really don't have my dad.
Yeah. Like.
And so now you're grieving this relationship that never was.
Mhm. Yeah.
Fast forward 6 years later, you have to grieve a relationship that was.
Yes.
Excuse me. The relationship of your mother,
Mhm.
the love of your mother, the protection of your mother.
Yeah.
Fast forward 4 years later, you have to grieve the relationship of your brother
Yes.
because nobody knew how to help you.
Mhm.
And no one stops to think, and it happens every day.
Yeah.
It happens every day. No one stops to think, to ask the child, are you
Are you
okay?
okay? Yeah.
And people say, "Oh, children are so resilient, yada yada yada." But if we just take a look at society, if we take a look at the actual suicide rate of children, if we take a look at all of those things, I
Yeah.
wasn't a cutter, but I was a beater. I would literally
Mhm.
go and beat myself with a hammer, and I would do it on my inner thighs and in my thighs so nobody could see it.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so, because the thing about it is, you need a physical pain to make sense of the internal emotional pain that you can't make sense of,
Yes.
because you're not equipped with the tools, you're not equipped with any of that to process it and to really deal with those emotional traumas and those feelings as a child. And
Yeah.
especially growing up in a black community, the black people don't talk about anything.
Mhm.
They don't. They like, if you're acting out, they're just gonna try to beat some sense in you, not realizing that there's a pain out there, that that child is feeling a pain. She's experiencing a pain.
Mhm.
She's gone through so much that the only way she knows how to cry for help And so for somebody to see me is for her to act out, or he or she to act out. Because
Yeah.
when you act out, people are going to see you.
Yes. People see. Yes. You said
People
it.
see you when
Yeah.
you start flipping tables
Yeah.
and stealing and sneaking out and doing all of those things.
All
People
the
see
things.
you then.
Yes.
But
Yep.
when you're just, so that is the only way. And it's not just kids, it's adults as well. Like
Yeah.
so many people just want to be seen, and they don't know how to verbalize it. They don't know the language to
Mm.
communicate, hey, I need you to see me, that they begin to act out in a very unproductive, a very some violent, I mean a very negative way, because they know then you're gonna see me.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you said that because when me and my husband were dating, one of the things that he had realized was I had trouble verbalizing things. So even as an adult, right? Like I didn't know how to put into words what I was feeling. I didn't know how to put into words what I needed. But he's such a patient and excellent communicator that we had to walk through that, and for me to know that it was safe, right? It's okay. I'm here, but let's figure this out because the way you're communicating is not normal. But it was the normal that I knew. And I've been in constant therapy growing up.
Yeah,
And that communication was always a problem. And that stemmed from my youth, not knowing how to speak up, not knowing how to speak out, not knowing how to tell family what I needed.
because and I just have to go there because you know adults think that as children all we need is food, clothing, and shelter.
Yeah.
And so when there comes a point where you have to communicate any other need, they don't know how to process it, or they choose
Mhm.
not to know how to process it. What do you mean you need this? And so if you're not taught, or if the communication of your needs is not welcome or received as a child, you grow up and say, you know what? That's a defense mechanism. Okay, I'm not going to communicate my need because it was never
It
received
was never
well.
received. Yeah. Yep. You said
And
it.
so now it's in your subconscious. Just bottle in your needs.
Hmm.
Just bottle in your needs because it's not going to be received well. There's so much development. There's so much of who we are is formed and developed as a child in our
Yes.
youth, and that is why the enemy targets so many of us in our youth. That childhood trauma, I promise you, it is. I mean, I don't even have the word to describe the magnitude of the
Hmm.
effect of childhood trauma, because and what
Yeah.
it does to you as an adult when you don't deal with it,
Yes.
when you don't deal with it, or you don't, or you don't, like, serious, you
It
know.
the the rejection takes root. The
Oh yeah.
abandonment takes root, and it shows in our decision making. It shows in our responses. It shows in our passive aggressiveness. It shows in our every being. like
Yes.
like yeah, a lot a lot of what I went through as a child um molded what I did as a teen, but really molded the decisions I made in college, the decisions I made when there was no family around, when I felt like I was grown and I had to look out for Brittany, right? Um, that was bad. I was a promiscuous teen. I was, you know, in the streets, I was wild. But I also felt like I had to survive. So, in doing so, I was hanging with the drug dealers. I was hanging with the scammers, right? Thinking, oh, I could do this, I can do this, but each and every time, God blocked it. I couldn't understand why other people could get away with stuff, but with me, I'd get caught up. So it was a situation where I'll never forget. It was Friday the 13th. Um, my phone. I was told that I had to pay my own phone bill. And I was like, I'm in college. I don't even have a job. How does this person expect me to pay my own phone bill, right? So,
Yeah.
what did I do? One of the guys I was talking to, I was like, yeah, I need money, whatever, whatever. He's like, oh, okay, da, 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 we can go do this, that, and third. I ended up going with him upstate, furthermore upstate, because I went to school upstate. And girl, I ended up being arrested. I mean, helicopters, police cars, everything, um, and facing 5 felonies. Okay, 5, 5. Mind you, I'm in college. I shouldn't even be in this predicament, in this situation, but that intervention right there did something. Um,
Mm.
and my grandmother was like, I am not going up to the jail. So she sent my aunts. My grandmother did not do jail, okay? That was not her. She sent my aunts, and my aunts was like, why didn't you come to us? And I was like, y'all got your own kids.
Yeah.
Y'all got your own kids. So I always, that burden, that feeling of being a burden, which is why I didn't go to family for certain things, which is why I didn't ask, right? Like, if me and my cousins are around the same age and I got this and these needs, you got your kids and they need, so who am I, right? I never wanted to feel like a burden. So I
Right.
always felt like I had to do stuff on my own and for myself, no matter the risk. And that experience and knowing the possibility, like I might get kicked out of school, I might really have to go to jail, led me into going to church in in the neighborhood where my school was. Now I was in and out of church growing up, but this is me as an adult
Yeah.
stepping in the house of the Lord and really crying out like, I don't want to be this way. I don't want to feel this. I don't even know what this is, right? Um, and I remember the cry, and I remember going to the altar, and you know, the pastor praying over me. And when I got back to my seat, I saw that I had a voicemail. So after church, I called. I called my voicemail. That was back then, right? We had to call our
Yeah.
voicemail to
Yeah.
get the message. And it was my attorney. And he literally said, Brittany, I don't know who you prayed to. I don't know what you did, but they dropped the 5 felonies and gave you a misdemeanor. I cried my heart out. Words couldn't put the feelings that I felt in that moment, but I knew, now I know God was always covering me, right? Because there's no
Hmm.
way. Let's nobody gets going from 5 felonies to a misdemeanor, one misdemeanor. Um, and I had to do community service.
That reminded me that I just that just reminded me of Job. He said you can touch everything he has, but you can't have him.
Mm,
You can't have him.
no,
They couldn't have you.
mm-mm.
But you facing those 5 felonies was what you needed to shift.
Yes, yes, yes.
To shift. I want to backtrack real quick because you know talking about being a burden on other people. Like I told you, I didn't grow up in the house with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
but that was something that and I'm still you know right now God revealing that to me and just saying go deeper in that healing, um not wanting to be a burden. and not seeing myself as a burden, because I thank God for my grandmother and my
Mm.
granddad. You know, when my mom moved up north, um, she was 22, I want to say 22, 23. There was nothing here for her.
Mm.
Nothing in the country for her. Like no jobs or anything. So I get it. And so my grandmother and my granddad, they put, food, clothing, shelter. They loved me the best way they knew how, but I developed that I'm a burden.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a burden because me too. Everybody had their mom, at least their mom. Some of my cousins had their mom and their dad.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, their mom, my dad, he lived what, maybe 15, 20 minutes away, if that, my entire childhood.
Wow.
But it was more so, and I saw them. Saw my dad's side of the family, those things. Um, my dad's mom, that was my nana. She was the living representation of unconditional love.
Mm.
Like that was unconditional. She knew how to chastise you, but you knew without a doubt that she still loved you,
Yeah.
and that what she was doing was from love. But I grew up feeling like a burden.
Mm-hmm.
Um and went off to college. I remember so vividly. I called a family member and I said, "Hey, you have any food stamps?" Because at that time they had cut my hours at work and I
Mm-hmm.
had to work at least 20 hours to qualify for food stamps. Well, you think if I could get 20 hours, I would be calling y'all. And they said, "Well, you can go and apply for some."
Mm.
And I had nothing to eat. And I remember going into Walmart, and Walmart had just started really doing self checkout. And I just prayed that I didn't get caught.
Mm.
That was before the cameras were at self checkout. That was before
Yeah.
all of that. But that was the only way I knew how to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, thanking God. And I can't tell you how many times, you know, I had to steal food because you reject me one time,
I'll
and
never
not realizing how much
forget.
it took for me to ask you,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
like to even part my lips to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Literally about to have a breakdown because I'm replaying it in my head. My heart is beating so fast that I'm literally about to ask you for help,
Mm-hmm.
and for you to reject me like that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I literally had to pray next God to help me with that, even through my healing journey. But, even now, like God recently showed me, like you still see yourself sometimes as a burden
Mm-hmm.
when
Yes.
you when and that's why you like go so hard sometimes, and not wanting to be a burden. That's why I've made, especially in college, and made some of the worst financial decisions ever because I
Oh.
didn't want to be a burden.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I need clothes. Okay, I can go to the mall and apply for every store
Every
credit card,
credit card.
every credit
Yes.
card that
Yes.
in the mall. And
Yes.
guess what? I can get approved for it, so now I don't have to worry about clothing. Let me
Mm.
go see if I can get a Walmart credit card. Okay, I got one. Guess what? I got food now.
Food.
I can do this. Okay, and it's because of and feeling like we're that burden. That's where that pride comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
So it's just it's not, trauma is so multifaceted, multi-layered, that it's like it's one thing that happens and it opens up Pandora's box,
Yes.
and it gives space. That's why I say don't give the enemy a footstool.
Mm-mm.
Trauma is a footstool for the enemy if you don't have the tools or the people or the help to acknowledge it, to accept it, to
Yes.
deal with it, to process it, and to heal from it.
Yes. Yep.
And here we are as adults trying to navigate life still in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing God just really spoke to me and said, no matter and no matter how much of a burden you felt like you were on your family or other people, like
Hmm.
we're never a burden to God.
Never.
And that's why it is so important for us to really understand our role as a daughter,
Yes.
um, as an heir, because even our earthly parents, we could, think that we're a burden on them once we get to a certain point in life.
Hmm.
Um, but we're never a burden to God
Yeah.
because it is his responsibility to supply all of our needs,
Yes.
and he knows our needs before we need them. But
And
we have to trust him, we have
hmm
to obey him, we have to honor him, we have to get to know him, we have to spend time with him,
yes. Yes.
because if not, we're gonna feel like we're a burden to God.
And he had to deal with me a lot in that area, especially like I didn't know that I was still carrying that, right? But it wasn't until last year, when they had diagnosed me with MS. I didn't want people to know.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I didn't want to put a burden on them. So, like, my family knew, my immediate family knew, but my mother in law didn't know. And my husband, who's still fighting an illegal arrest, like, we're still fighting, been fighting that. But he felt like if he couldn't be there, then his mother should be there. But I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want her to drive out here to take care of me. I didn't want people to change their plans to care for me. Like I and I didn't know that it was pride. I didn't know. So she didn't know probably like until I got home from the hospital. I was in the hospital for over 2 weeks. She didn't know. She didn't have a clue. Didn't have a clue. And I told him, do not tell your mother, right? But I didn't know I was being prideful until God convicted me of that thing. And I had to learn how to be open to receive help. Now, I've always been one that helps everybody. I love showing up for people,
Ooh,
doing
ooh.
things for people, serving. I love it all. But when it comes to Brittany
Mhm.
receiving help, accepting help, um, Brittany not turning away help, that was the problem. That was the struggle. So I had a conversation with her, and she expressed her feelings about it, and I kind of felt bad because, at her core, she loves caring for people, right? She loves nursing people back to health. That's her gift, and I kind of took that away from
Away
her, I
from her.
guess. Yes. So, God had to do healing in that area, and then my good girlfriends were like, "Stop it, stop!" Like God said to help you, I'm going to help you. And somebody told me, do not be a blessing blocker. Don't block my blessing. And
Ooh,
I didn't even see it as that either. And
yeah.
then another one was like, you're being very prideful, Brittany, and God doesn't like it. And I'm like,
Who told you to hold a mirror?
right? Like, so just so not only did he use this whole experience to show me that, but to also show me how I needed to lean on him. Like I couldn't lean on my own understanding because a part of my perception was still broken. There was still some residue in how I saw myself. There was still some residue in how I thought that others saw me. Like I couldn't see myself through the lens of how God saw me. I didn't. But he said to trust in me with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, right? So if my understanding is limited, then I'm going to put a limit on what God can do, until I was in a situation where I had no choice but to depend on God and watch what God could do. Um,
Whew.
so it's been. yeah, like I feel like while he healed me physically this past year, um, he healed me mentally, he healed me emotionally, he healed me relationally, he healed me spiritually. I'll never forget, about 2 weeks after I got out of the hospital, he put it on my heart to reach out to my mother's sister, the one that lives now in the same state as me. And I hadn't spoken to her in over a decade. Mind you, I was cut off from my mother's side from the age of 15. What? Why is, all right, Lord, all right, whatever. So I had looked online, searched her, found an email, sent an email. She replied, and then God does all things well. Check this. I'm having a barbecue at my house this weekend. You should come. This was the test, right? Okay. So now the whole ride there, God is like, you have to forgive. You got to give it to me. You got to release, right? Like, just going through this whole 70-minute ride to her house. And when I got there, the hug, the embrace, right? And not only, was it her house, her barbecue, my aunt, who I had lived with at 15, was there too with her daughter. So now it was like double healing, right? Like, I didn't know how to, had it not been for me having these moments with God, I wouldn't have known how to receive that. I wouldn't have known how to respond it. Like, none of this would have went nicely if I was still dependent upon Brittany. But I hugged her. I spoke to her. She was like, "Oh my gosh, your voice is different. You sound different. You look different, right?" All of these things, because she hadn't seen me in years, right? And
Yeah.
who's this woman in front of me, right? Like, because I left a little broken girl, but now I'm an adult, and not only am I an adult, but God is doing the work on me. So it was, I left feeling like a piece of the puzzle was put back together again. Um, Another form of, restoration took place. And even now, still in conversation, with my aunt that lives out here. We text, we talk on the phone, all of the things. I shared like my poetry book with her, and I would send her the things that I'm working on in church, and just opening
The door.
the door.
Even more.
So I said all that to say, like, when I surrender the pain, the trauma, the shame, the grief, the guilt to God, what He has is peace, restoration, reconciliation, joy, a sound mind. Like, it's literally a divine exchange. And it, I can't nobody get the glory out of that but Him. Can't nobody take credit for it, but Him. But if you would have asked Brittany 10 years ago, would she even be in the same room with, these people? I'd be like, no.
No.
For
For
what?
what?
Ain't nobody, ain't nobody checking for me. Like, nobody going out their way to find me. You know what I mean? Like, still talking from that broken place, but mm-mm.
Mm. That's like, it is so beautiful when you see the transformation of a person. It is, even if you haven't known the person their entire life, but when they talk about where they were and then they start to talk about where they are,
Yeah.
there's a transformation that happens when they shift into a new narrative.
Yes. Yes. Hmm.
Like the octave in their voice changes.
Hmm.
Like there's a peace in their voice.
Yeah.
There's a transformation that happens, and that is why, here on, on Beyond the Healing, we talk about what we had to heal from. We
Yeah.
talk about the healing journey, so that we can get to beyond the healing, and
Yes.
for you to experience that shift in the narrative,
Mm-hmm.
that shift in the story. I have a tattoo on my arm right here, and it's a heart, and a portion of the heart is a semicolon,
Mm-hmm.
and surrounding that is a butterfly. It represents the love of myself, because my story is not over,
Mm.
because God is continuously transforming me into the woman I was born to be.
Yes. Yes. That's
And
beautiful.
so there's always going to be a shift in the
Yeah.
narrative, because we're not meant to remain stagnant. We're not
Mm-hmm.
meant to just be content. We're meant to go from glory to glory to glory. And God has to take us on different journeys. You
Yes.
know, starting out the season, one of the guests was, she was like, when God knows that he when you heal from the first thing,
Mm-hmm.
he knows he can trust you to heal from the next thing.
Yeah.
Because in order to heal, you have to trust God, you have to be obedient, you have to, do all of those things. And so once you say yes and say, God, I'm going to heal this, and then you heal this, he shows you the second thing and the
Yes.
third thing, and you
Yes.
continue to say, okay, God, let me do this, okay, we're going to do this. He
Mm-hmm.
knows that he can trust you to heal all of it.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's okay with exposing it to you,
Yes.
and you won't allow it to negatively affect you,
Yeah.
because you see that as an opportunity to grow, especially when you have a heart for God, especially when you have a heart to say please your daddy, especially when you have a desire to
Mm.
be who he called you to be. And
Yeah.
so many people say that, but do you really mean it? Because when you mean it, God will show you some stuff, and you say,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to be everything that I called you to be, you're gonna have to deal with that and that. And
Yeah.
so many people tuck their tail and run the other way and become of the world, and still being transformed
Yeah.
by the
Hmm.
renewing of their mind. And
It.
that's
Yes.
that's the posture we have to have, like, in order to
Continually.
heal,
Yeah.
to continually heal, to go
Mm-hmm.
to be beyond the healing. You have to
Yes.
have a posture of, I want to be everything that God called me to be, and
Oh.
I don't
Absolutely.
want anything to hold me back. I don't want the enemy to have a footstool, because if he knows that there's something that you're still struggling with, he's going to do whatever he can to
Yes.
manipulate that
Yes.
situation
Yes. Yes. He
and
will.
throw you off your game.
Oh, I just when I made the decision. So I moved. I moved 2 years ago, but I still was traveling back and forth from here, to Brooklyn, and I I heard God say, "I need you to be still." Now, it was in the stillness where I was like, okay, I'm gonna, make my doctor's appointments. I'm gonna switch my doctors over to this place. You know, um, Someone was like, you need a church home, even though I was cool, being online with my church back in New York. I wasn't stressing, having to be in a physical building. Um, but the enemy played. He played, right? He played. Number one, I went to support someone at a church they were speaking at, and I didn't use discernment when it came to seeing if this was the place for me. But because, you know, people attend a church doesn't mean that that's always the church for you.
Mm.
And you got to sit there and you got to observe and you got to see what this is. Now, I didn't know this before, right? I'm like, okay, it's a church, whatever she spoke, okay, he's preaching. Now, did my sensors go off a few times? Yes, but I was so excited to be settled in this new place, right? And get reconnected and all the things. The enemy um used this as someone to speak over me. It was a false prophet.
She was prophet lying.
Yes, he was prophet lying all the way. Even went as far as to say you know, your mother's not dead. And that kind of stood out. And I was like, my mother's been dead for 25 years. Like, what is he talking about? Oh, she might be dead. Oh, she might be buried, but she's not dead. And you got to go to the place and this, that, and the third, right? So already now my antennas is like, okay. Then afterwards, he proceeded to ask me what my mother's birthday was, and then said, that's not your mother's birthday. So now it was just a lot of nonsense, right? But I'm still not picking up. Brittany,
No.
no, this is not it, right? This, God ain't here. What is this? Because this is not of God. So it was just, it was that stuff, and it was heightened, and it was a lot just continuing to carry on. And I was just like, what? Now, other people around me were still, going, and I'm just sitting there and I'm looking, and I still was taking the new members classes and all of this stuff. But it was the 2 days after I had graduated from the new members class, I ended up in the hospital. Now, the person was like, uh, God wants you to think that because you joined the church, this is happening to you, and this, that, right? It was crazy. But it was funny because I never heard God say more clear, come from amongst them. And this is when I went into seclusion with just me and him. And I began to have conversations with my best friend that isn't, she's not out here, but I began to talk to her about what was going on. And she was like, I consider her my wise counsel. And she's like, well, why didn't you tell me this? And I was like, I don't know. Right? Like there was, I don't know. I feel like it might have been some shame, but had I been open with her about everything else, it would have been called out immediately. But
Mm-hmm.
it was so much, Dorcas, of me wanting to belong to a place and build community in a place that I didn't discern that that place wasn't even for me. It wasn't of God. And I literally had to renounce and denounce some stuff because I, yeah, it got bad. And I even brought it, to a friend, the person I considered as a friend, the concerns. And she said, sometimes I do idolize people, ada. And I'm like, yeah, because XYZ. Now I had a whole list of things because this is the conversation and everything. And we don't speak. We no longer speak. And, she's still a part of it. But I realized that when we are on a journey of drawing closer to God and really surrendering to God and growing with God, the enemy will try, if we're not
Mm-hmm.
fully healed in places, right? He'll try to come in and to get you, to knock you out of alignment with what God is doing, to get you to cross over to the other side, right? To win you over. And it was just like, we got to really be on guard because
Yeah.
the enemy wants our destiny. He wants to steal our destiny. And when we come to a place of wholeness in God and walking with God and really surrendering to Him every day and really dying to ourselves, every stronghold is broken. Things are broken off. Things that He wanted to weigh you down with, things that He wanted you bound in, things He wanted you in agreement with no longer hold power. So it's like, I want every person listening, just because it's spiritual doesn't mean it's of God. And you have to be on watch all the time. You have to. You cannot afford to sleep because the enemy don't sleep. One thing about him, he is very patient, and he will wait for you to slip up, and he will wait for you to he will wait for that open door. If you think that a horoscope is not an open door, it is.
It
If you
is.
think of having somebody read your palm or whatever, do a card reading, all of that, yes, he has slow walked me through witchcraft. I could say for 2 years up until I ended up at that place. But I knew what it was because it was a familiar spirit. So now, like, Dork is like, it's so much because you don't really think. right? You don't think that it can happen to you. You don't think that is that deep, and it is that deep. All of it is that deep. So I just, yeah, I don't know why God had me share that with some
It need
but
it, and one thing. Hey, that's one thing I say. God knows
yes,
what we need when we need it and how do we need it. And
yes,
someone who is, whether they hear this podcast now or this episode now, or they hear it a year from now or whatever, that's something that needed to be said. And that's one thing. You guys don't know, my prayers always say, God, we decrease so that you can increase. Speak through us. We are your vessels. Let them not hear. They may hear our voice in the flesh, in the physical, but they hear your voice in the spirit realm.
yes.
And healing allows you to go deeper within self. And
Mm-hmm.
by going deeper within self, you get connected. You go deeper with God.
With God, yeah.
Because the only way you can go deeper within self and to see self at your core is that you connect with God, that you
Yes.
keep a connection with God. And so I had to have you on here. You had to be the finale. And I know why. And I'm just so thankful for your yes. And so
Yes.
I'm so thankful that you get to share your story. I'm so thankful that God is using you. I'm so thankful that you chose obedience. And I'm just so thankful that you're continuing to live life beyond the healing and allowing God to just show you and continue to blossom and bloom into who God created you to be. And so, as we're
Thank
wrapping up,
you.
do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Um, just to give yourself grace. Um, life beyond the healing is a journey. Like, don't think that because you're drawing nearer to God and you're doing the work that you've arrived. No, baby, it's always more. Like Dorcas said, taking you from glory to glory. Like, it's literally levels, and
To
the more you grow, the more you're gonna find these attacks to come. But you also got to be on guard. You got to know what weapons to use, and the suffering is expected. Christ suffered, so you have to suffer. We can't skip the suffering. That there's things that are produced in us in the suffering. Like, I wouldn't be as courageous and bold as I am now. I could be more, but as I am now today in this moment, had it not been for that suffering that taught me how to persevere, that taught me how to be a conqueror, that taught me how to be resilient. Um, all of that came through the suffering, the strength, the needing God. That was through the suffering. The sufferings to draw you back to Him. And like me and Dorcas have talked about many times, my birthday is May 10th. My favorite scripture. I don't know how this came about one day, but I went in the Bible and I'm like, let me look at this, and I ended up at First Peter 5:10, and that is a scripture that I believe is my promise. And not just my promise, but I think it's the promise for all of us. Like, and the God of, all grace, who has called you to His eternal glory in Christ Jesus, after you have suffered a while, He will, make restore you, perfect you, establish you. All different versions say different things, but it's after you have suffered a while, He will strengthen you. He will establish you. He will perfect you, right? Like, that's God's promise. So know that as you heal and you learn how to live this life healing, God is perfecting you. God is establishing you, right? God is strengthening you. But you got to surrender in order to receive that. It's not easy. It will always be uncomfortable. We grow in the discomfort, but don't give up because it's worth it. It's worth it. And stay connected, especially to Coach Dorcas, because she's gonna walk you through some things. I promise you, 3 years ago, Brittany couldn't have this conversation. I remember being in Dorcas's room on Clubhouse and just crying, child. She told me to come up to the stage and unmic, and I cried. You remember that, Dorcas? I cried. I couldn't even put into words what I was feeling. So this level of communication, this only came because I had to go through the healing, so we can talk about this. And you saw me, cry tears talking about my mom, but That's healing. The tears are healing. All of this is healing. And you'll be amazed by what God does in you and through you in life beyond the healing. It's
That part.
exciting. It's exciting.
It is exciting, and I'm excited for
Yes.
what life will continue to be beyond the healing.
Yes.
Um, Thank you all so much for listening this season and rocking with your girl. And to all my guests, thank you. This is just season one, and I am so excited for what God is going to do in season two and beyond that.
Yes.
And like she said, give yourself grace because you won't always get it right.
Mm-mm. No.
The grace that God gives us when we don't get it right. Stay connected. Brittany's information is in the subscription below, the description below. So is mine. Just be on the lookout. God is doing some amazing things. Find your community. If you
Yeah.
need help in your healing journey, there's help. God said He will supply all of your needs according to His riches and glory, and His riches are plentiful. And he has placed jewels and gems, and he has daughters who have accepted the call on their lives here on
Yeah.
this earth to help guide you, to hold your hand every step of the way. So many people have dropped you in your life, but God has appointed people in your life that will not drop you. They will not lead you astray. They will not drop you. You
Mm.
are not a burden to God. And so the people that you're assigned to, the person you're assigned to, you will not be a burden to them. Open your mouth, speak up. And one thing I tell all my clients, we can heal in silence, but we don't suffer in
Mm-hmm.
silence. I love you with the love of the Lord, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. Until next season, peace. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next season for all new episodes of Beyond the Healing, the podcast.